TV18.
Hello and welcome to CNBC-TV18. I'm Shireen Bhan. This is our special series, The Bad Medicine. The Indian government has launched a probe into 4 cough syrups manufactured by Haryana-based Maiden Pharma. This after the World Health Organization issued a global alert last night saying that the use of these 4 products could have potentially caused the deaths of 66 children in Gambia. The WHO says that lab analysis of samples of each product confirms that they contain unacceptable amounts of de-ethylene glycol and ethylene glycol as contaminants. As per sources, the WHO alerted the Indian government about its findings, and government sources say the drug regulator has launched a probe into the matter. They add that as per a preliminary inquiry, they find that the company has exported the concerned syrups only to Gambia so far. Now, Maiden Pharma, the company in question, claims on its website that its plants are WHO certified. It lists a certain Dr. Naresh Kumar Goyal as the MD. The website says the company started its operations in the year 1990. Now, DG contamination is a serious threat and one that has unfortunately led to fatalities in India for the past several decades. It has also led to fatalities in many parts of the world. To talk about the epidemic of DEG poisoning and the regulatory lapses that need to be plugged, we will be joined by Dinesh Thakur, public health activist, and Prashant Reddy, lawyer by profession. Both of them have co-authored a book which will be launched soon called The Truth Pill. The book analyzes the actions of institutions that are responsible for the safety and efficacy of the Indian drug supply system. Before I get Mr. Thakur and Prashant Reddy into the conversation, let me go across to my colleague Ekta Batra on the developments that have taken place in the last 24 hours. Ekta, what is the World Health Organization saying, and has the company in question responded to the charges?
The World Health Organization has issued a medical product alert indicating that 4 cough and cold syrups made by Indian-based private pharma company Maiden Pharma could be potentially linked with serious kidney injuries and deaths of 66 children in Gambia. The WHO has said it was conducting further investigation with Maiden Pharma and regulatory authorities in India. WHO has also recommended all countries detect and remove these products, though so far it has been detected only in Gambia. They could have been distributed to other countries. The Indian authorities such as the CDSCO too have acted fast and taken up the matter of Maiden Pharma immediately with concerned state regulatory authorities, and a detailed investigation is launched in collaboration with the state drug controller Haryana. The reason for these 4 cough syrups, which could have caused over 60 children dying in Gambia, is likely due to the drugs containing unacceptable amounts of the toxic substances called diethylene glycol or DEG. DEG is a solvent which is present in numerous formulations, from brake fluids to paints and chemical preparations. It is a highly toxic organic solvent that causes acute renal failure and death when ingested. DEG is not used to manufacture cough syrups, but the contamination arises mostly if the company is manufacturing the drugs uses a low-quality industrial-grade propylene glycol for the cough syrups, where DEG is one of the impurities. Hence, pharma companies need to ensure they are using propylene glycol, which is as per pharma standards, hence safe. Industrial propylene glycol contains high levels of DEG and, if substituted in pharma products, can be toxic. While there could be other factors of contamination such as an overall faulty supply chain, this is probably the most common one, especially when it comes to cough syrups. Lastly, DEG contamination are not new, with cases recorded since the late 1930s. Globally, for India, DEG contamination has been linked to 14 children dying in Chennai, 21 fatalities in Mumbai due to the drug administered containing 18.5% of DEG. In 1998, 36 children between 2 months to 6 years were affected by acute renal failure as a cough drug manufactured by a company in Gurgaon was found to have contained 17% of DEG. 33 of these children died. And as recently as 2 years ago, in 2020, 17 children were hospitalized with renal failure, and more than half died after being administered coal-best PC cough syrup, which contained over 30% of DEG.
Ekta, many thanks for joining us. That is where we currently find ourselves with respect to this particular issue of DEG poisoning. To talk about this issue and take this discussion forward, we're now joined by Dinesh Thakur, public health activist, and Prashant Reddy, lawyer by profession. Both of them, as I mentioned, have co-authored a book, The Truth Pill. My colleague Ekta also with me. Mr. Thakur and Prashant, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. It's good to have you back. I have to say, I got an advance copy of your book, Mr. Thakur, on Monday. I began reading it on Monday. And yesterday, when the news broke, when the WHO put out this global alert, I have to say I had a visceral reaction, a physical reaction, because the prologue of your book talks about the epidemic and the regulatory failure when it comes to DEG poisoning. Dinesh Thakur, let me understand from you, why did you feel the need to address that issue at the very start of your book? And in many ways, is it symptomatic of the lapses that continue?
Thanks, Shireen, and thank you again for this opportunity. Over the 3 years while Prashant and I were writing this book, we never thought that we would start our book marketing campaign on such a ghoulish note. But here we are. I remember talking to you 5 years ago, about the regulatory lapses within our regulatory framework, and nothing seems to have changed. The reason why we've picked this incident in Jammu 2 years ago, where Ekta talked about the fact that this company called Digital Vision, which sold coal-based PC syrup, contained 33% of diethylene glycol. That essentially was the most sort of how would I characterize it? Just probably the worst kind of situation where children, young children, as young as 7 months, 6 months, succumb to acute renal failure because of this particular syrup that was contaminated. The worst part about this is that it's been 2 years now. Nothing seems to have been changed. Yes, the Himachal Pradesh state drug regulator made all the right noises saying that we will do the investigation, as Haryana is doing today. The CDSCO said that they would also do something about it. But here we are, 2 years now. What has happened? Has the company been held liable? Has anything changed as far as the manufacturing process is concerned? Has the CDSCO put out any report that tells us why is it that this adulterated syrup was administered to these young children? We see this pattern repeating time and time again. I mean, just a few hours ago, I saw a tweet out by the All India Association of Druggists and Chemists saying that this company only exports, to overseas countries. They don't sell anything in India. That's a bald-faced lie. Go back and look at the excellent database that the CDSCO runs. There are multiple instances of these companies' drugs failing in India, in Gujarat, in Kerala. I don't even know where to start. The reason why we picked this particular instance, because it is probably symptomatic of the callousness, the responsibility, the complete lack of accountability of the drug regulator when it comes to our medicines drug supply.
Yes, several important issues being raised there. And, I want you to read out to our viewers an excerpt from the book. And as I said, this is the prologue of an over 500-page book which addresses the issue of DEG poisoning, an issue that has now been red flagged by the WHO in the last 24 hours. It says India has the uniquely depressing record of having had at least 5 major DEG poisoning events. The first took place in Madras in 1972, killing 15 children after they consumed a cough syrup called Pipmol C. And then, of course, it goes on to talk about, as Dinesh and Ekta were mentioning, the incident in Jammu, which was the 5th, in your words, Dinesh Thakur and Prashant, the 5th case of mass poisoning in India on account of DEG. Prashant, let's address that issue. At the heart of the matter, one of the big challenges seems to be that there are multiplicity of regulators involved. In this case, for instance, it is the state government regulator that seems to be supervising, that seems to be overseeing the operations of this company. It is now the national drug regulator talking to the state regulator, and that seems to be at the heart of many of the other violations that Dinesh talked about, including the one of 2019, the last case of DEG mass poisoning that we saw. Is one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest issues that we need to address, the multiplicity and the lack of coordination of regulators at the national and the state level?
Absolutely, Ms. Bond, you've hit the nail on the head. So this has been a problem right from 1940, when the first drug regulatory law was being drafted in colonial India, where the challenge was on who exactly is going to be in charge of drug regulation. Today, we've landed up in a system where India has a common market for buying and selling drugs. So a drug manufacturer in Himachal Pradesh can reach, Tamil Nadu and Mizoram within a span of a few weeks. But when it comes to regulation, we have a very convoluted system. We have a federated regulatory system where each state has its own regulator. Plus, we have a central regulator that looks after imports and certain other activities. And what happens in such a federated regulatory system is that it becomes very difficult for coordination, interstate coordination. So if you speak to drug regulators down in the south, who actually do a pretty good job, they'll throw up their hands and complain that they can't do anything against a Himachal Pradesh pharmaceutical company because it's the Himachal Pradesh drug regulator that issues a manufacturing license. The only thing that, say, a drug inspector in Tamil Nadu can do is to criminally prosecute that company, but that criminal prosecution takes its own sweet time. A drug inspector in Tamil Nadu cannot even go and raid the manufacturing facility in Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, without the cooperation of the local drug controllers. So you have a system where even states which are interested in cracking down cannot do anything because most of the manufacturing happens in certain excise-free zones in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. And because those state governments are not interested in cracking down on the pharma industry, we continuously see incidents like this.
Mr. Thakur, there seems to be a cultural issue as well when it comes to India, and I want to get your thoughts in it. The fact that we are extremely compliant when it comes to global developers, the US FDA, the European regulators, biosimilar approvals, cancer drug approvals such as Revlimid generic. But on the other hand, there are issues such as these that crop up in the domestic pharmaceutical industry. Do you think that there is some amount of a cultural issue which stops us from compliance and enforcement when it comes to domestic pharma?
Well, culture responds to regulation, right? I think that the bigger issue that we have is that over the last 50 years, we've engendered a dual standard of manufacturing. We comply with the stringent regulations when we export our medicine overseas, right? Many of our manufacturing facilities are US FDA compliant. So we can do that. The problem here is that when you have two different sets of standards, one for export and one for domestic use, and especially when you know that the level of compliance and the level of accountability is sorely lacking when it comes to our local consumption and to export into countries where they don't really have a really good regulatory system. Like we see this in Africa. These kinds of incidents happen, right? We see this Vietnam blacklisted a whole bunch of our drugs a few years ago because they found out that they were substandard. These companies would never dream of doing that to Europe and United States because they know that they have to comply with stringent regulations there. The question I guess we have to ask is that why do we encourage, allow, or why are we satisfied with two different set of standards, right? The same companies that make this product for export comply with a stringent standard, but when it comes to actually, delivering it for our own people here, or to countries where there's not enough, a stricter regulation, we fall, over ourselves, and try and cut corners. So it's a culture, comes from, the way that our regulations have been written, and for far too long, we have closed our eyes. We have always said that we want to encourage our industry to try and be competitive in the world. We don't want to put any shackles around it. Ease of doing business is touted as the more important thing as the regulator than protecting public health. So that's where the culture comes from.